Hey guys, Ruckus Gaming here, coming at you with another episode of Tuesday Tips and Tricks. And today we're talking about Speed Climber. Now, this is an achievement that I think a lot of people may never even attempt. I know this was the absolute last achievement that I got before I unlocked them all, and I avoided it for a long time because I think I was very intimidated by the time limit. I don't like to be rushed very much when I'm playing games. I like to sit back, take my time, think about things, especially in a game like this one that has as much complexity to it. So, as an inexperienced player, I think Speed Climber is a really daunting achievement that a lot of people struggle with or don't even attempt. And part of the problem is that you need to approach a speed climber run very, very differently from a normal run. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But very, very first, I want to mention some settings that are actually going to help you do this a little bit faster and easier. These are the settings I always play with, just because I've become accustomed to them and enjoy them this way. But I'm specifically talking about number 1, fast mode right here. This is going to affect how fast cards are drawn and put into your hand. This will affect how fast the cards are played and their animations are played. And those are really going to add up. It may be fractions of a second, half of a second for each interaction, but those really add up. And the same exact run with fast mode off could be several minutes faster, depending on how it goes. Another really big setting I think you should turn on is the quick select keys. That means when you're looking at your hand, above each card, it's going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And I use that because when you are playing a speed climber run and you're trying to go quickly, it is much, much faster to have your hand hovering over the number keys above the, QWERTY keyboard and using those to select your card. Hover with your mouse over the enemy you want to attack and just click the number key, then left click. And that's going to be much faster than dragging back and forth like this. It seems a little bit silly and like it won't make a much of a difference. And it may even slow you down at first when you are really getting accustomed to using the keys. But once you do, it is incredibly easy, incredibly fast, and it will make a big difference over the course of an entire run. And the final thing I want to say is you should definitely turn off these long press confirmations. Obviously, if you have to hold keys down for longer, it's going to make your run longer. And I do think you should turn off the disable confirmation when choosing one card. You don't need to click an extra time. There's just click the card you want and then you're done. So very, very small things, but over the course of a run, playing potentially hundreds of cards, I think fractions of a second here and there that many times is going to make a huge difference. So if you've been playing with the kind of base settings and you've been struggling to get under 20 minutes, try changing some of these and you might be surprised at how big a difference it makes. Now let's actually go back and take a look at the run history for this run. You can see here, let me go back. This was my very first attempt and I immediately just hated the map and pieced out. I hated it because I had a forced floor 6 or 7 elite and just did not want an elite, especially that early. Here, this was a pretty good attempt. You always like Niao's Lament when you're doing these just because of the absolute speed that will allow you to start off with. And my second true attempt, and then finally my third. So this did not take me a very long time, in under an hour. And let's just take a look at up here, and I'm going to mention a couple quick things. Obviously, when you are going for a speed climber run, One of the first things that is going to differ between a normal run is that you are not going to want to fight any elites. So when you look up here, you're going to see 0 elites. The number one thing I always did every act was I quickly scrolled and just scanned the entire map to see if there's a path with 0 elites. And that was generally the top priority. Also, fires were great. Even if you can't do anything there, even if you cannot upgrade any more cards, even if you don't need to rest, if you don't have Peace Pipe or Girya or any camp relics, you still want to go to fires just because that is a fast floor. You don't need to do anything, it's just click and you're out. So this is much more desirable than a hallway fight, and I think there were some instances where I actually pathed away from fires because they were elites, but usually speaking, you would want to say, go for fires, avoid elites. The next big thing I think you should consider when going into a speed climber run are the events. When you are at an event, you want to obviously be making quick choices. That kind of means you need to have a little bit of familiarity with the events, so you kind of have a gut instinct to go with. You don't have the ability to sit and consider things. And for the most part, even in speed climber runs, there's not going to be many events, or there aren't going to be many events where you have to think very much. They're pretty clearly either good or bad. They are going to give you a curse. They are going to make you lose a card that you really rely on, etc. Those are obviously bad things you don't want to do. And then there are obviously good events. You get to upgrade, you get to heal, you get, potions, whatever it is. But in the event, you do get some kind of challenging event, or perhaps even a challenging card choice, a challenging shop where you're not quite sure what to do. I think the best thing to do is give yourself a maximum of 5 seconds. And if you can't decide after 5 seconds, or if you can't really have a strong idea of why this card or this event or whatever it is might be good, skip it. Take whatever the least bad option is, even if it is kind of bad, and just get out. Because you can't really afford to spend time hemming and hawing. Thirdly, you will also see lots of shops here. I think that is very similar to the fires in many ways. Even if you don't have gold, even if you cannot remove, even if you have relics that prevent you from using your gold or whatever it is, you should just be going to shops for fast floors. My deck was mostly put together by late Act 2. That Reaper there was kind of the last really big addition. And after that, I'm not really looking to add cards. I'm literally just trying to sprint as fast as I can to the end. So when you get a semi-competent deck, you will just need to YOLO and go for it. Hit floors that you know you can get in and out of quickly, especially in Act 3. Those are tough enemies. You don't want to get stuck in hallway fights, certainly not in elites. So just go for shops, go for fires, go for unknown rooms, and hope for as few Act 3 combats as possible. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into it. I already showed the run history, but I wanted to leave this part in here anyway, just to show that this is not a seeded run. Some of the Tuesday tips and tricks guide videos are seeded, but I felt like for this one it's important not to. When I got the Niao's Lament, that was perfect. I absolutely love that for this, and I think it's even worth starting a run and quickly quitting just to get Niao's Lament. Right off the bat, we get Pommel Strike, which is a huge plus. It's going to allow us to draw more cards, and we are aiming to get some flexes, which we will do pretty soon here. At this event, I got a Akabeko. I was hoping maybe to get a Whirlwind. It didn't work out. Shot was pretty good. I got my first power, my first strength card, which is very important. When you are playing a run like Speed Climber, you're going to end up with less relics, which means that scaling out of your cards is more important. Fossilized Helix is also very nice. It allowed me to YOLO a little more, block less. Great relic here. There's the flex I wanted. So the reason why Pommel Strike is so good, great Molten Egg by the way, is that when you draw more cards and they are 0 cost, it allows you to play more. So for Speed Climber, it's great for Ironclad to have lots of draw and maybe even a couple flexes so that you are always getting extra strength, and even your strikes will do decent damage. I even love Pommel Strike so much I take a second one, especially upgraded with that Molten Egg. This is not a great fight, but I got through it pretty easily actually, just because of the Inflame and the pretty good value that Ironclad has with even basic attack commons like Pommel Strike and common skills like Flex. So a little bit long in the turns. Don't really love a 3-turn fight, but it's okay. Ancient Potion is outstanding, and Heavy Blade is going to work very nicely with our strength. That is essentially our win condition at this point. You have a couple options on Ironclad. You can go Strength and Whirlwind, but Strength and Heavy Blade is another very easy route to take. Another flex I will definitely take. 3 combats in a row is a little bit heavy here. I would have liked less combats, especially with so many different enemies. But I think the #1 priority should still be very much no elites and then campfires. So if the best line with no elites and lots of campfires has a little more than you'd like as far as combats, it's okay. You can hopefully make up for it later in another act with more unknown rooms. But you also do want to make sure that you are getting card rewards. You still have to have a decent deck, and you can't really put a good deck together without cards. Limit Break was a great addition there. I'm not going to upgrade it for quite a while, because you don't really need to upgrade Limit Break. Usually if you have 2 or 3 sources of strength and 1 Limit Break, that's enough. Twin Strike is another multi-attack card that's going to work great with our strength. I'm upgrading the flexes first because they're 0 cost, and if I draw them with Pommel Strike, I can play them all the time. So that's why I'm going for those first. Limit Break with Flex works amazing. I'm holding on to this Ancient Potion for a while. Definitely blundered here. But the good thing about these Speed Climber achievements is you should be playing on A0. Didn't mention that before, but you don't want A1 because you don't want elites. And if you're under A5, it doesn't matter how much damage you take in the act because you're going to get a full heal anyway. So definitely lean into the Ironclad playstyle and go for lots of damage with not a lot of block. And I'll even pick up a second Limit Break here. I paused momentarily thinking about Runic Blood, but Black Blood is going to hold a lot of weight and is going to allow us to continue YOLOing with very little blocking. Here again, I'm scrolling, looking for elites and fires. There's a pretty decent line on the left there, and it's got an early shot, so we're definitely going for that. Here in Act 2, the name of the game is basically going to be find a little bit more strength, maybe a little bit more sustain, and just get into a good rhythm. You're really going to be looking for the same cards over and over, so you should always have a good idea of what is the top priority to play. For example, in this deck, flexes, limit breaks, pommel strikes, those are usually going to be the first couple cards I play in any given turn if possible. I'm got my finger hovering over the numbers key, and like I have number 1 ready to go before the rest of the cards are even drawn yet. And you'll see sometimes I do make mistakes with that. I'll kind of play a hand poorly because I just want to go fast. And I think you have to accept some amount of that with a speed climber run. You really don't have the ability to sit there and consider the best draw order. You really kind of have to just play reflexively. And what's going to help you with that is having a smaller deck. That means you're going to see more similar hands. You're going to get less unique draws. You're going to see the same cards over and over together in more similar groupings. If you have a big deck, it's going to take you a long time to draw through it, and there's going to be lots of different variations. So once I have the core of the deck, I'll add some pieces to it if they're really nice, but I'm already starting to skip a lot of cards. Right there, I avoided the campfire because I didn't want that elite. That is how serious I am. You just don't want elites at all. Alright. Another little bit of a longer fight. Didn't get the greatest draw. I think it is kind of challenging to find a good time to use potions when you're speed climbing because you are so focused on your hand and playing your hand as quickly as possible. So many times I start to, hover over the potion while the enemy is taking their turn. Took Cleve for a little AoE there, but I'm probably not like dying for it. I was just remembering a couple of those Act 1 fights where I was stuck trying to kill 5 different gremlins. And with strength, even Cleve is pretty decent. This was an absolutely amazing hand. I love this hand. 60 strength. Absolutely beautiful. Didn't get to use it that turn, but 52 is more than enough to get us through this combat. Gambler's Brew is another great potion. Those were all great cards, but they just were not necessary. Ornamental Fan is a fantastic block for all the attacks we're going to be playing. More draw to hopefully get those flexes in there together with more attacks. This guy, he ended one of my runs earlier, so this felt very nice. This is one of those fights that can be extremely tricky because of the malleable. Another one is Baseball with the large amount of barricaded block he has. Can take a while to work through it. Again, pretty good cards. Clash accepted. Just don't need them. You want to keep the deck reasonably small as long as you have what you need. Stay in your lane. Don't try to get too fancy with it. I think I may have even turned down a corruption later. I think you just have to take the strength and a couple multi-attacks and go for it. You see I'm taking a bit of damage here, but Black Blood is doing great for us. Don't need the attack. I do want the energy. Shrug is a decent block card just because it comes packaged with draw, and it's a fairly reasonable amount of block for an A0 run. 11 block is pretty good for especially most hallway fights. You're not going to be hurting if you can get to that Shrug. Probably didn't need to play that defend there, but that's what I said, When you're playing fast, you're not going to play your best, but you don't need to. A0 is pretty forgiving. Jaxed is strength, so I just take that right away. Again, as I said, you really want card scaling because your relic bar is probably going to be pretty sad. That Akabeko would be great if we had Whirlwind. Unfortunately, we don't. But with the Heavy Blade, we have our late game solution. This is another boss fight that's going to be a little spooky. Those are definitely going to be the most common areas where you're probably going to lose a run. It could be just getting poor draw. It could be the matchup. I think one of my other runs ended the champ just because I couldn't really scale up well enough with the way my cards were drawn. And sometimes it's just how it is. With these speed climber runs, the positive is that if you fail, you didn't waste a lot of time doing it. You've been going quickly, so you're not investing a lot into each run necessarily. At this point, we're a little scared of this attack, and I'm trying to figure out if I have any way to survive this blocking, and ended up not really needing it, as you'll see. Tried to block and then realized, oh wait, I can just kill. Reaper here over the corruption, and I take the runic dome for the energy. At this point, I don't really care what the enemy is going to do, whether they're attacking, defending, status, whatever. I just want to get strength so I can kill them as quickly as possible. Again, scrolling, looking for elites and campfires, and I see it right up the middle. Shapes are never what I would call my favorite fight, especially with the spikers. I'm trying to figure out if I can use spot weakness to determine if any of them are attacking. Got lucky, and the Eruptor, I don't know, what's this guy's name? Can't remember. Anyway, despite having their thorns, you can't really be too scared of them. You just kind of have to attack. Luckily, Ironclad has lots of healing options. Third flex, a little unnecessary. Just want to keep the deck reasonably small. If you get 3 flexes, you're going to start to run into instances where you've got 2 flexes, 2 defends, and a strike in your hand, and that's kind of ugh. So don't go overboard, but 2 is very good in a small deck. This is actually some of the first real blocking I'm doing in quite a while, but with the strength and heavy blades showing up, we didn't care. Unfortunately, we get a combat in this unknown room, but we do get 1 dead on turn 1. Thank you, Fossilized Helix. I think it pulled an incredible amount of weight on this run. Again, trying to use that to see if I can get something out of it, but unfortunately not. I think it's worth the energy to play that regardless. Sometimes speed climber runs, you're going to actually end your turn early. If you can see what they're doing, they're not attacking, and you have a defend, there's no reason to play that defend. It's just going to take too long. So you may end turns with 1 or 2 energy sometimes. There, I think it's worth the energy to play that, to see if he's attacking, and to get a little strength. Now I kind of want to make my deck smaller if possible. Briefly considered the bronze scales, but decided I wanted to hit that later shop. Now I'm eventually getting around to upgrading those limit breaks. Not necessary, but may as well, since that's the only thing we can really do. Again, just removing cards, moving on. Don't want to add anything particularly, so in and out as quick as possible. Very fortunate to get 2 dead there. Scaling up our strength so we can hopefully kill the spiker in as few hits as possible, so I don't take too much thorn damage. Playing a little slowly here for some reason, not sure why. And there we go. Again, Black Blood doing great here. And I love this Battle Trance for draw. Even though it works against the Pommel Strike and the Shrug, it'll definitely help to get more flexes in hand more often. And final combat we're going up against the Maw, and we get a great first turn. Absolutely love that. Starting off with, what is that? 14 strength. Quite nice. Again, doing 2 turns of setup, essentially. And he's dead. I actually do like the headbutt. Not sure if I even use it in this fight at all. I don't think I do. Unfortunately, no strength on turn 1, so I'm just trying to do as much damage as possible. Not really much to do with that Rupture except Jax, so don't feel like it's worth playing, really. And of course, Jax shows up. What are you gonna do? Limit Break I've been holding on to now, just because you get those flexes so frequently. If you can keep drawing, you may be able to get a much larger Limit Break off later. This Reaper definitely saved the run. In hindsight, I'm going to take a big chunk of damage here in the next couple turns. And without that Reaper there for 25, I would not have survived. So there's another lesson for you. Like, usually Reaper is one of those cards you kind of sit on and wait until the perfect moment. You can't really be doing that in Speed Climber. Whatever the card is, whatever the setup is, you can't sit around and wait for it. You gotta just play what's in your hand, make it happen immediately. But right now we are sitting pretty. This is the last chance of us dying. And yeah, 13. If we had not healed to 25, we'd definitely be dead there. And that's the run. So as you can see, Speed Climber is something that I think Ironclad is particularly useful for. I think some of the other characters would struggle, and I'm going to talk about more in just a minute. Now that we've seen a successful Speed Climber run, before we take off and end here, I want to just have a couple closing comments about Ironclad and some other possible paths that Ironclad has, and as well as the other characters. Now that we are looking at some of the Ironclad cards, I just want to point out a couple other things to look for. Maybe we didn't have this run or didn't necessarily jive with this run so much, but could be extremely useful in your own Speed Climber run if you get different card rewards, if you get some different relics. Perfected Strike, I think, is actually pretty viable. You may not get tons of removes, or you may be removing only those defends. You can pick up other strike cards like Pommel Strike, Twin Strike, Heavy Strike. Regardless of what kind of deck you're running for Ironclad Speed Climber, you're probably going to have lots of strike cards. So, Perfected Strike is actually pretty viable for a Ironclad Speed Climber run. If you are feeling a little bit vulnerable and having a hard time not blocking, you feel like you must block, and you may need to sometimes, Rage is a very good solution to that. It's 0 cost, it scales off of the cards you play, so the more attacks and the more energy you have, the better it is. It's a very useful card. I would have definitely taken it if I had seen it on this run. Searing Blow is another very uncommonly taken card, a very uncommonly useful card in that it's not often useful. But here, it could be great. The simple fact is, Speed Climber is easier if you have fewer cards to play. If you are just looking for 1 or 2 cards and you're playing them multiple times over and over and over, if you've got lots of draw and you've got lots of energy to do it, that's how you do it. You can just hit up lots of fires, upgrade this as much as possible. Don't upgrade anything else. And just go straight Searing Blow, get lots of draw, get lots of energy. And of course, I mentioned this several times already, but Whirlwind is an absolutely amazing tool for these speedruns. It's not the strongest card, but it's great for multi-enemy combats, and it scales off of your strength, so the more strength you have, the better it is. And it's an X cost card. So if you can load up on lots of energy, if you get a Seeing Red, if you get Offering, if you have multiple boss relics that offer energy, then Whirlwind is going to be amazing. And if you can get Chemical X, if you can get Akabeko on top of that, you are absolutely set. And Berserk, I think, actually deserves a look here. It's going to give you free energy. If you upgrade it, it's only 1 turn of vulnerable. So that's actually not bad if you're looking at an enemy that's not attacking you right now. There's no reason not to play this, because by the time they attack later, the vulnerable will be gone, assuming you don't have multiple stacks. But one of my previous runs that I actually didn't succeed on had a Berserk in it, and it was wonderful because I was not getting any energy relics, and I was not getting any energy. I was not getting an Offering, I was not getting Seeing Red. That was my only energy. So Berserk is definitely very takeable, especially because you're not going to be blocking a lot. You're kind of accepting damage. All you need to do is find a little bit of sustain. Maybe you take the Black Blood. Maybe you get a Reaper. Maybe you have a Bloody Idol, Blood Vial. Maybe you have Pantograph, Meat on the Bone, Meal Ticket, Eternal Feather. There are so many healing relics that you should not be that scared of taking damage, especially on A0. Now let's talk very quickly about Silent and why she's not a great option for this. And it comes down to a couple of things. Number one, a lot of her decks are going to require a lot of card plays. For example, Shiv's decks. These are just going to take a long time. Maybe they can be really chunky if you have several accuracies and you've got a Wrist Blade and you've got a this and a that, you've got Terror. You can get some really big Shivs. But the fact is, you need to play 4 cards to make this card do what it does. And that's just too slow. And that happens a lot. You know, you're going to be drawing a lot, discarding a lot, probably. If you have Poison, that's not going to kill on your turn. You're going to have to wait for the animation after your turn, and it's just too slow. If you are doing something like a Reflex, Tactician, Draw, Discard deck, I mean, that is just playing too many cards over and over and over. Silent really thrives on playing a lot of cards over and over, and that's just not really viable for a speed run. I think the one way that this could be possible is with a grand finale. Gonna be tough to put together though, I'll say that. If you can get this grand finale really early, you might be able to do it. But I would suggest definitely try another character. Unfortunately, a lot of the same things that I just said about Silent apply to the Defect as well. He does rely on lots of card plays very often. His only physical kind of deck that's very common is a Claw deck, which obviously is going to take lots of card plays. It's going to be very slow, not the quickest form of scaling by any means. And if you're going with some kind of Orb deck, again, you run into the same problem as you do with Silent and her Poison. They've got these very long passive animations after your turn. It's going to extend the game. The more turns you have, the longer you're waiting for your lightning to fire off. It's just going to be too slow. Now, obviously, there's always, it depends. And I could see something with Meteor Strike and Hyper Beam working out pretty well. The Hyper Beam is not going to matter too much with the focus loss because you've got lots of plasma and that just does not affect plasma. And this is a big, chonky attack. Again, you'd need a lot of help to work out. You'd maybe need a Snecko. You'd maybe need a Necronomicon. I don't think it's a super high percentage play to go for Defect on the Speed Climber. So if you are a Silent main or a Defect main and you absolutely love those two characters and you don't play Ironclad that much, this may be a time for you to try, because it's going to be a tough road just being able to get through playing all the cards you need to play to win. And finally, the Watcher. This is the next best option after Ironclad, and it is just because of Wrath. Eruption or Tantrum or whatever Wrath card you want. The double damage buff is going to make so many combats shorter, and that's just how basic it is. I think throwing in Crush Joints, upgraded particularly for more vulnerable stacks, is going to speed that up even faster. If you can go into Divinity, Prostrate's a great way to do that. Another one of my favorite Divinity cards is here, Prey. If you can get into Divinity and do triple damage, you also get energy on top of it. It is absolutely amazing, and it will be incredibly quick combats. You will need some big damage cards as well, because you don't have scaling the same way you do with Ironclad. You know, you can get some strength off of Wish, but that's not really going to be the strength that you need to really close this out. You're going to need some big damage. I like a Wheel Kick upgraded. I like a Reach Heaven upgraded. If you can get those are going to be great for dealing quick damage. And of course, Ragnarok, if you've got a little bit of strength. So this is another solid option. I may do a Watcher video next week. We'll see. But this is the basics. And I think you can apply that, take what you've learned from this video. If you can try it out on Silent, if you can try it out on Defect and pull it off, you're a better player than me. More power to you. You know what? If you can do it, let me know in the comments, and I'll check it out so I can learn something. As always, thank you guys for watching all the way to the end. Please have a great day, and thanks for watching Ruckus Gaming.